All right, I'll get going. I don't know how long this is going to be. I have an hour. Yeah. So based on the polling that I did earlier, the very scientific polling, I'm going to go a bit more middle of the road. And I have some code. We can demo some code. I have some other stuff we can talk through. I have a general guide, but feel free to derail me. I can tell stories about just about anything. Most of them are true. And yeah. So here's the title of the slide. I think the presentation thing or the schedule says Xamarin Galaxy. So these are the forms features that you totally forgot about and should maybe be using. Your mileage may vary. So I often will hear from people that they like, oh, I didn't think Xamarin could do that, or I didn't know that that was part of the toolkit. Or they'll say, hey, do you still support such and such? It's like, okay, maybe it would be good to remind everybody of some of the things that Xamarin does and does really well. So as before, I am still David Ortinau. I am still a senior program manager with Microsoft's mobile developer tools. Nothing has changed since this morning. I've not been fired, reprimanded. Nobody at the home office is watching. So we're good. We're good. I particularly like this slide just to point out how this dude is coding. Is that how you code? Like this, like, what's going on? This is wrong.
That explains my posture.
Yes. Oh, yes, right. And we're all like buying those new IoT things that just like are supposed to help us do this.
I just watched you doing that a half an hour ago.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. For sure. I was totally doing that. My posture is horrible. Absolutely horrible. All right. So, next slide. Oops. Yeah. So that's the rest of the slides right there. That's it. End the slideshow. End the slideshow. So that's it. That's all you get. Here we go. So first thing I wanted to show and point out, and let's go ahead and make this full screen. Look at that. Everybody read that in the back? So if you don't spend much time here, I do. I spend a lot of time up on our GitHub. I wanted to point out a few things to you that could maybe give you more insight into what's happening. So we do maintain project boards. And as you can see here, this is our current sprint that started on the 5th and will run through the 23rd. So we just finished that sprint. It's done. That's why we had a retrospective meeting on Thursday. That makes sense now. Of course, you can also see we've got certain project boards for carousel view and collection view. If you want to know what is currently scheduled for the vNext, you can check that out. We probably, looks like we are keeping up with quite a few of these things. So, yeah, a lot of good information in here. If you want to see what it was that we were supposed to be doing, let's see here. Yeah, there's all the done stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that was planned that never got to the doing, I guess, part of the sprint. So that's good to know. Let's also look at the wiki real quick. So we do have a feature roadmap. So 4.1.0 is out the door, and now 4.2.0 is out the door. Previews, updates to carousel view and collection view. If you have not tried these out yet, we've been using the set flags method so that within the app delegate and the main activity, you can enable functionality that is in preview status. And so if you want to explore those features, currently the only thing that's in there is collection view. Shell was in there previously. Fast renderers were in there previously. So that's a way for us to continue to ship things in the same branches and hopefully get more people using them, really is the whole goal. Because the more that we get you using them, the more bugs you file, which is not a bad thing. That tells us how we're doing, right? And lets us know, are we getting closer to a stable release? And so some of the things that are on the horizon for us, how many of you ever filled out a survey that I've sent out? Have ever filled out a survey Microsoft has sent out? Better question, and I will totally shame you now. How many of you have received an invitation to fill out a survey and not done it? What? Dude, why? Why? You don't like nice things?
100 questions is...
Ah! It's like, I mean,
I'll go and I'll start filling it out. And I'll get to the second page and be like,
I give
I'm
up.
already too tired.
Yeah, I've seen that happen. I've seen that
It was
happen.
your survey because it was your birthday.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
That's the only reason.
The only reason? Well, it made a big difference.
It was a very long survey.
So
That's the one I didn't complete.
here's a tip. If you want the shorter version of the survey, don't tell me you use every platform. Just tell me the one platform you actually use. So I think a lot of people probably check the iOS and Android, even though they're just using Forms. And if you just Forms is fine. Unless you are doing traditional iOS storyboarding and things like that. Anyway, all this to say, the feedback we get from the surveys leads us to then do interviews with you and find out what we can really do to help. So, you say you have trouble with this or that, or this is a struggle, I wish this was easier. Then we get on the phone and we're like, well, kind of show us your apps and show us what you're doing and help us get a better picture of what we're really talking about. Let's try to make it more concrete. So one of the things that we talked about recently, which is not yet on this list, but is customizing the navigation bar. What would you say is your number one frustration with customizing a navigation bar? Anyone?
Can't be customized.
Can't be customized. What was the other one?
Buttons on the left.
Buttons on the left, okay. How about when you try to put a logo in the center?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it's always kind of like, it's like, it's not quite in the center because those buttons on the sides take up space, and the native platforms don't give you the full width to work with. So your other alternative is to create a custom renderer, which is not a bad word. Creating custom renderer is an awesome feature to be able to get to that layer. Other platforms, you don't have that flexibility. So customizing the navigation bar is something that we hear most recently is probably a big thing we can help with. And then customizing tabs in general, both within Shell as well as outside of Shell. So we're going to be working on that stuff. A couple of other really cool things that are coming down the pipe. Custom embedded fonts. And so this is basically cross-platform fonts. So you'll be able to just drag and drop your font files into a shared project and a shared library. Don't confuse that with the shared project type, that evil thing, evil shared project. I know it's useful in some situations, but it's actually a huge pain. So you drop your font file in there, and it will auto-wire everything up for you, including the info plist stuff, creating the on-platform for your font so that you can use your styles everywhere, and you don't have to worry about trying to remember all that stuff. Even if you do remember it, it's like 4 steps, and it would be much nicer just to be able to drag and drop and you're done. So there's that, and then there's also, we're working on solving cross-platform image support. That's definitely a larger request and a larger piece of work, but the ability to let the platform, should you choose, deal with all the multiple resolutions. We've got a UWP developer or two in the room, that files get put in a different spot, right? So then you're constantly doing, when you're on UWP, it's in the assets folder, but when you're on iOS and Android, you're fine. Stuff like that. Yeah, so other cool things here. So if you didn't know it, we have a roadmap. Check it out. And then the other thing that I would highly recommend you do is use, I'm going to go back to the wiki. Oh yeah, 2 more things on the wiki that I wanted to highlight. First of all, you should totally be checking out the nightly builds. Updating NuGets, no big deal. Super easy. You can flip back and forth. Create a branch. Everybody's using Git, right? We don't have any like CSV. What is it? CSV, CVS? What is it?
Subversion.
Yeah, I went Subversion. Yeah. Curial.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, he said the T word.
Visual sources.
Copy paste. I can't edit this file. It's locked. Yeah, so just create a branch and just upgrade it to the nightly build and see what happens. It shouldn't take you very long. I do it all the time. I'm flipping back and forth between NuGet versions and Visual Studio versions and installs of Xamarin. I'm still alive. I'm still kicking. It's all good. So, but you can always get the nightly build. Basically, the way the nightly build runs is that as long as tests are green, CI is going to kick out a build on that day. If it's not, then it's not. So, sometimes you'll see that the nightly build hasn't been updated for like a week. Probably means that we've got some tests that are failing, and we're working on addressing them. It's definitely something that we're being alerted about regularly, so you feel free to always tell us, hey, why isn't the nightly updated? But we already know. But tell us anyway. Don't ever like pretend we know. We probably do, but never hurts to say something. All right, and then the last one that I wanted to call attention to here is the platform support. So these are the different platforms that you can reach with Xamarin Forms. Of course, Android and iOS are the two big ones. Those are the ones that we spend the most time focused on. And frankly, we don't spend the most time focused on them because we have some personal love for them. It's because that's what you're using. And we want to make sure that we're giving you the biggest bang for the buck. And then UWP, of course, is supported after that. But I'll be completely honest with you, it doesn't get a ton of love or usage. So that's why you see us eagerly shipping iOS and Android things right now. And we'll fill in the UWP as we're able, but we also are open source, so we definitely welcome any help that we can get from internal as well as external support. So I would rather be much more transparent and honest with you about that than pretending like, oh, no, we totally. Because our focus, and this is really a Microsoft focus, this is one of my soapboxes that I like to preach about when I have an opportunity, because I have the microphone, is that our focus is really more on you and the customer and less on platforms. I don't serve the platform per se, I serve you. And of course I'm serving you via the platform, right? But I'm not here to make Xamarin, UWP, iOS, Android a thing. It's only a thing because you're using it. Does that make sense? Does that make you feel warm? Like when I lay down at night, I'm not thinking about the platform, I'm thinking about you. That's not creepy. But this is here, and if you want to know, okay, well, where do things stand and who's supporting it? More importantly, this is a good place to come look. So of course, GDK Sharp is really on the community. Samsung for Tizen, and then WPF is still considered community. And for the most part, I would say Mac OS is community, but we do put our name on it because we built it. But it's still considered preview also, and so I get the question very often, when's it going to be out of preview? And it's a hard one to answer because it's not something that really we've roadmapped to ship it as a full thing. It's out there to see if you're interested in it and if you're using it. I do know that we do have customers and in production using GDK, Mac OS, and WPF. So those lesser known ones, they're actually being used. I wish I could show you some awesome examples of it, but that's all NDA stuff. So I don't know. Trust me, believe me. I always hate saying that because like, oh yeah, right. You have to say believe me. All right, cool. So let's talk about some of the other things. I'll hit on release notes real quick to call your attention to a few things, and then I'm going to talk specifically about some features, and then I've got some code. So if you're like, oh, is this dude just going to talk to us? Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of what a presentation is, but cool. So yeah, what?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if Mac OS is going to become bigger, but you guys, I think it's going to become bigger soon.
Yeah.
You guys, and WPF too, right? Because now that .NET Core 3 is coming.
Uh-huh.
You guys thinking about it, maybe taking,
So I mean, it helps to have a really big customer that's using it, right? I mean, let's
be honest.
be completely transparent, right? If you have a big demand for something, then there's more reason to invest in it. We may ourselves have reason to invest more in WPF because it does solve some other problems for us in terms of being able to deliver better experiences, like for within Visual Studio, for example. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see where the .NET Core stuff goes. Conrad, one of our contributors, sent a pull request showing WPF with Xamarin Forms running on .NET Core. So we've got the help from the community, and the fact that PR even exists is some indication of interest in being able to do that. So Mac OS, I think, is a little bit different in that I think a lot of this is something we need to learn, and so I guess maybe I'll turn the question to you. How many of you are intrigued by the idea of taking your iOS applications to the desktop using Apple's new Catalyst functionality?
You think Apple's what?
Apple's new Catalyst functionality? How many of you, that's the first time you've heard that that's even a thing? Okay, so I'll introduce it to you real quick. So what Apple is doing, and it's not fully out there yet, but it used to be called, or it used to be dubbed Marzipan. I don't know that it was ever technically a name, but now they're calling it Catalyst. And essentially what this is you can take your, and they typically talk about it in terms of iPad, but really any iOS application, and you can deploy it to macOS. Okay, so now your mobile app or your tablet app, because now tablet apps also, as of iOS 13, support multi-window. Okay, so Xamarin's there to support you on that as well. Xamarin Forms, we've done work to implement multi-window support, which also benefits, by the way, UWP. And so you'll be able to take your Xamarin Forms, Xamarin iOS apps and put them onto the macOS desktop. So from that standpoint, I almost think that macOS as a backend becomes slightly less important because now iOS gets you there, and what is macOS kind of just fills in maybe some APIs. I don't know, but so if you have, how many of you have worked on or support tablet apps? Okay, so quite a few. Do you treat them just like phone apps, or do you have custom UI that is specific to the tablet?
Custom. Sometimes responsive, sometimes custom.
Okay. All right. So I think this would be an interesting thing to talk more about. So if you're interested more in what we might do around this space and being able to take your apps to that desktop scenario, reach out to me. Let's schedule a time to talk. And you can kind of show me your app, which would be most useful. Show me your tablet apps. Show me what you're doing with it, or your mobile apps. And say, hey, this would be interesting for me to get onto the desktop. Let's talk about it. That would be very helpful for me to learn that from you and to kind of add that to our backlog of data as we make plans moving forward. Cool? Awesome. Thank you for that question. That turned out really well. Okay, real quick. What's that?
You didn't sweat at all.
I never sweat. Actually, I'm kind of warm up here. It's all good. All right. Are you chatting with people on YouTube?
Yes.
All right. How's it going,
Twitter.
YouTube? What's that? And Twitter?
Yes.
Awesome. People are super excited.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Am I in frame? Am I good?
Yeah.
So of course, release notes. Does anybody? Well, I gotta stop polling you guys. You're like, oh, I'm so tired of raising my hand. I pull a muscle. So we have the release notes. One of the things that we've added recently, two things actually. First of all, API changes. So if you're like, okay, that's great, those are all the new things you did, but has the API changed? Are you about to break me? Scan this puppy, and you can see all the different changes if we've deprecated anything. It looks like a long list. It's not that bad. It's a 4.2 release, so it's not. You're fine. You're fine. It's not going to break you. And then, of course, 4.2, so we do have a bunch of notes. Probably the key thing, what I would normally click on is go down to release history, and like I would almost skip the first three things, because this is really what's in this release, right? It's the Wednesday, August 21st bits. So you can see that, but what I wanted to go to was the thank you. So we've been doing this on our latest release notes. Has anybody had your name appear here on the release notes for the thank yous? Anyone? Bueller? Yeah? You've been on the release notes?
I think I was on the 4.2 release notes.
Yeah, you're famous. Did it go on your resume? You're like, you updated your CV? You're like,
Should. I was really small to read.
So we have a lot of the usual suspects, Adrian Knight, Andre Natescu, Alan Gerchik. Yeah, so, tons of awesome contributions here, always really nice to see. So if you want to be famous, be Twitter famous or GitHub famous or whatever, then contribute something and your name will be in lights. And then I'll highlight you in a .NET stand-up or something like that. Cool. We're all ego-driven a little bit, right? So I wanted to, and I'm using the docs as just a way to jump off and talk about some of the things that are in Xamarin Forms. Obviously, I know that you can go read the docs yourself, but I'm also interested to find out who's using some of these things. So this is the landing page for Xamarin Forms docs. Some really good stuff here in terms of jumping off into application fundamentals, building your user interface, dealing with images and things like that. All of our XAML stuff, we have some XAML markup extensions and things like that that you can benefit from that are non-typical to WPF or UWP. Platform features is probably the first thing that I wanted to dig into because, certainly one of the major differentiators for Xamarin and Xamarin Forms, and perhaps one of the reasons that you use it, is the ease with which you can do things that are platform specific. So when iOS releases something that doesn't quite exist on Android or UWP, you can still use those things. You just have to use a different API to get to them. Whereas the more common something is, like we recently did checkbox. Did everybody see the checkbox? Anybody using the checkbox yet? All right, at least one, two checkbox fans. Okay, so this is interesting in that checkbox doesn't exist on iOS in terms of in UIKit. Now, actually, we had an internal summary meeting, and I was talking about the checkbox, and Miguel de Casa, whom everybody knows, right, was like, "Oh, I don't like this one," and I'm like, "I know you don't like it, but it's important, and people are using it, and people really, really want it." He's like, "Yeah, but iOS doesn't have a checkbox." I said, "Oh, but they do." Oh, but they do. So there's several apps that are Apple first-party apps, and you go look at them, and there absolutely are checkboxes. Now, under the hood, it might be a UI switch, who knows, but it's a checkbox. And so he was like, "Oh, I didn't see this before." Okay, so he kind of softened his position on that. But I think it is a fundamentally important change for how we approach Xamarin Forms. Again, much more interested in what helps the customer, less interested in serving Apple. Because Apple doesn't know and doesn't care. So, checkbox, we polyfilled that, and now we have a checkbox that is supported for UWP, iOS, and Android. So more and more we can do that sort of thing, but if it's specific to one platform, then you're going to end up using platform specifics. So let's look here at some of the platform specifics that are available to you. Platform specifics. So here's an example of how, let's find a good example of how you would use a platform specific.
Dude, can you zoom in a little bit on the browser?
Yeah? What's that? Oh, you don't like my sound? You like my sound?
Yeah, good.
All right, good. Yeah. I really don't have much control of what comes out of my mouth when I'm presenting. I hear myself, don't get me wrong, I hear myself making these little musical interludes and whatever, and I know that it's bananas. But it's just like, why bother stopping? I mean, there's more important things to really focus on it.
There's a reason why they call it Twitch, David.
Because I'm twitching?
Yeah.
And super twitchy. Oh, come on, where are there's a whole list of platform renderers that I wanted to find, and I pulled the wrong doc to look at. All right, so let's figure this out. So let's go platform. Nope, not that. Creating other platform stuff features. There's a whole page that just lists them. Let's go to the Bing. Only because it's the default net. So Xamarin Forms platforms. Nope, not Xamarin Help. Let's see. iOS platforms. Oh, that's the page we were just on, yo.
Which one are you looking for?
I want the list of platform specifics. Oh, is this it? No, this isn't it.
The one that says
No, not that. Consuming. It's all consuming. Oh, 404. Somebody file a bug. But it's on. The great thing about when you hit a bug or something when you are live streaming is it's recorded. So I don't have to go back and look for it. All right, give me just one more chance to look at this. All right, somewhere on the internet. See iOS platforms. Somewhere on the internet, there is a list of all the platform specifics, and I'm not finding it. But so some of the things that you can do, you can hide the navigation bar separator on a navigation page. So we can see more information on navigation bar separator. And I noticed this actually on somebody else's app recently, where they had the navigation bar was a solid color, and then they had a content area with more buttons that was the exact same color, but there was still a line underneath the navigation bar. And I'm like, did you mean for that to be there? I kind of felt like it should have just all blended together as one big navigation bar, right? So it could be, and often is the case, that we don't all know how to do these things. So here's really what it comes down to. So you can hide the navigation bar separator with a true. So let's go look at how we might do that. I have code. Have code, we'll play. Does everybody know we have a toolbox? I don't know why it popped up. I never use it, but let's close it. I'm a keyboard. I'm not much of a mouse dragger. How many of you are mouse draggers? Okay, and how many of you really prefer your hands on the keyboard? Yeah. I would say that, so research indicates that one is actually not faster than the other in most cases. So I wish I could tell you that those of us who like the keyboard are just like smarter, more intelligent, more productive. But it turns out research doesn't back that up. It's just our own biases, right? Yeah, I know. Okay, so
You guys like to do more work.
yeah, more work. I just, for me, it's more of a RSI thing, repetitive stress injury, I think. I don't like to move my hands and like rest on my whatever. Who knows? But I also feel like I need to stand like this to be able to get to the right height for my. Is this weird? Alan, is this okay?
All right.
All right. So here's what we're doing. So we're looking at this. Let's actually run this puppy. Actually, let's not run this puppy. Let's run a new puppy. So don't save. Let's not save. Who knows? You know what I really should have done? I should have opened a new Visual Studio. Did you know you can open multiple instances of Visual Studio? How cool is that, right? Of course, we're going to choose a shell app, and we'll do platform. That's horrible. Platform specifics. Oh. All right, I'm going to ditch Android because I'm not going to run Android, so why bother? So I guess a couple of things I'll also highlight for you here is that we do have better XAML IntelliSense now. So there's a whole new XAML editor, which is great. It's getting better. There are still things that need to be rounded out and added to it to bring it to more feature parity with the Windows side of things. But having a common XAML language service is a huge, huge benefit. All right, let's run. I would like to note that the orange juice is 100% juice concentrate. It's legit. This is not just sugar water. Just pointing that out. So kudos. Thank you, Dylan and BSI for bringing real juice to the party.
Ignore the 44 grams of sugar.
But it's all natural sugar. It's only 32 grams, you lie. 38 grams of carbs, no fiber, obviously. How are we doing here? Did this thing build? It just like ignored me? I totally hit the command. Here we go. What happened? I thought I was buying time for it to build and run. Turns out I was just making a fool of myself. So you're going to go home and your partner's going to be like, honey, what'd you do today? Well, I went and listened to this guy babble for an hour. All right, cool. So we're going to have a bar, and I'm gonna magically poof, try to hide it. It's going to use some XAML hot reload, so we'll see what actually happens.
It's good things. I'm using it to workshop, and I just tweeted at Maddie saying how great it is.
Yeah, you did, huh? Trying to. Were you just kissing up, or?
No, it's legit awesome.
No.
What happened?
It's those experimental branches you're using.
Hey, it may have crashed Visual Studio, but it did not crash my emulator. Simulator. My simulator. Okay, cool. Well, it said it's going to restart, but I don't really have a ton of confidence in that. So, I definitely use a lot of preview bits. So, but this may be your experience too. The good news is we're all generating lots of error logs. I actually had the VS team reach out to me a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, are you by any chance running Catalina?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Are you having a lot of crashes?" "Yeah." I'm like, "Cool, because we got a bunch of logs from you." And I was just trying to figure out who it was, and maybe you could tell me what you're doing. I'm like, I might have breathed on it wrong, I guess. All right, let's see what happens this time. So, platform specifics, though, I think everybody understands now what they are. We have them for iOS, Android, and UWP, but they give you a nice, easy way to get in there, son of a biscuit.
Oh no.
Fine.
Is it because you're running 2 instances, David?
No, I'm not. It's just, this is the one that's trying to reboot. I mean, who knows? No, it's not.
Parallels.
I'm not only on Catalina, but I'm on the latest Xcode beta, and I'm running Visual Studio beta. And maybe it's being shamed by the fact I have VS Code open. It's like personally offended. It's like, oh, I see this guy's running code. Are these not the thoughts we all have in our heads when something goes wrong? We imagine that it got personally offended by something else we've done. Right?
Yeah.
Seriously. I don't know what this thing is.
Even on Windows, it says Visual Studio is taking longer time than usual. And I had to force close it. I don't know why that happens.
Does it? Yeah. What does it say? Unexpectedly crashed? I'm like, really? Was it unexpected? Pretty sure we all saw that one coming. All right. So you know what? I'm not going to run it this time. I'm just going to show you adding the code real quick. That's really the magic I wanted to get to. And then we'll move on to some other things. Since I've already killed 34 minutes. So here I'm on my About page. Sorry. I'm so sorry. The thing is I don't do that just because I'm in Canada. I would have done that anywhere. Anywhere.
We don't believe you.
No, I would have done.
Lies.
No, you just watch my Twitch stream. Like I said, can't control what comes out of my mouth sometimes. If you would stop laughing, maybe you'd stop encouraging me. All right. And it's all, oh my gosh, Control-I, crying out loud. Oh, my formatting's all jacked. Okay, so here's what you can do, right? So I can do this page. No, let's do it this way. So I'll do my XML and S first so that I can get my syntax highlighting. I'm going to call it iOS, and then I'm going to go find the iOS platform specific. So what's glorious about this, if you have ever been a VS Mac user, is that's freaking brand new. You could never get that before. So you always had to go over to the docs, and hopefully you're better at searching than I am, and you would have found this a long time ago, and you would have copy and pasted this, right? Yeah? I see some people smiling. You know what I'm talking about. So now you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now you can just get it like this. Whoops, crap. What did I do? Stop. Don't be that way. Why do you hate me? Okay. So now that I've got my XML and S, now I can go in here. That's one of the bugs that needs to get done. So now I can go to my page and I can say quite a few different things that I have access to now. Large title display. Does anybody use large title display on iOS? No? Didn't think so. Yeah, it's not a very common thing that I see many people doing. But it exists. It's an iOS specific thing. And so you could do it. Prefer status bar update animation. Pretty nice. The home indicator. Anybody with a X or above knows that you got that little black bar that appears at the bottom of the screen, or in this case it's white because I'm on a dark screen. you can hide that. You don't have to have that there. You don't have to worry about that thing obscuring your beautiful content. If you want to hide the status bar altogether, let's say that you have a particular screen and it goes all the way to the top and even under the notch or the chin or whatever you want to call that thing, then you can hide that as well. Cool. And then safe area, of course. So safe area is for the notch, making sure that your content appears in the place where Apple says it ought to appear. Now you can turn on safe area, but then you also have a bunch of other safe area options to be able to get the padding that has been added, and you can manipulate it to your needs. And you can do that per page or whatever you need to do. Cool. So let's look at a few other things. So navigation page, here is our hide the navigation bar separator, which was the one that we initially started looking at, right? So I can do this, and I can say, true, hide that puppy. I don't want to see it ever. And it'll hide it for me. And this is great because now I don't have to go create a custom class of a page renderer to be able to do this. Prefer large titles, we already did that. And then is the navigation bar translucent? Now, unfortunately, translucent isn't transparent. I personally think that it should be super easy to make a transparent navigation bar because I can't remember the last time that I designed anything for mobile that actually showed the background color of the navigation bar. I want to use all that real estate for my content, and the only time that I want the navigation bar to even appear is when I'm scrolling and or when I stop scrolling, one or the other. So anyway, hopefully that'll come at some point. But for now, you can do translucent, which kind of gives you that see-through blurred thing that Apple is quite fond of. All right, cool. So that's platform specifics. I think I've hammered that one home. Lots of cool things that you can do there. That was just the iOS stuff. There's a bunch of other types and things that you can get to, so check the docs on that. All right. Boom, native views. Oh yeah. So here's one that probably nobody in this room uses. If somebody in this room has actually used a native view in a app you've shipped, I don't know, I'll chug a soda or something, I don't know. Anybody? Yeah, nobody's using these. But you probably didn't know this is actually quite easy to do. So I've included my iOS, oh I didn't, I left it. Boom, there it is. So I've got my iOS namespace. Did you know I could do this? People are like, oh, Dave, hey, we need a segmented control. Why can't I have a segmented control? I want a segmented control. Where's my segmented control? So, oh, maybe it's not that one. Of course, it's not platform specifics. That's why. It's the wrong namespace. Actually, let's try this. Let's just try this. Segmented control. I wanted to see if it would help me solve it.
Wait.
Just wait?
Wait.
You think it's doing something? It's not doing anything.
Now you can.
It's not doing anything. I love your confidence, though. I love your confidence. It's not doing squat. So let's go in here and let's do it old school. What is my namespace? All right, here it is. So it's UIKit. That's what I was missing. UIKit. So now I've got access to. Oh, now I just totally broke. It's not going to work. Oh, there's something. There's that. UI. Oh, for crying out loud. It does not do IntelliSense. All right, but anyway. The reality is that this totally works. And now I've got a segmented control on iOS. So you have the ability to do this also with Android widgets. Any UI control that you have access to in the native toolkit, you can bring into a XAML file. Now, this is not as easily done, and if memory serves me, it's totally impossible in C# in a .NET Standard library, but we have the magic to be able to do this in XAML. So if you have a very specific need for iOS to have a very platform-specific control, and you're like, you know what? I would rather just do this all in XAML, and I don't want to create a custom renderer, and I would rather build it up myself, then this is a great way for you to do that. Now, where this gets a little squirrely is like if this thing takes constructor parameters, then you end up doing stuff like UI. Well, you're not going to autocomplete that for me, huh? And then, I don't know, there's like a constructor parameter property or whatever, but my IntelliSense is broken. And I don't use this thing very much at all either. So, but it's available to you. There's potentially some very cool things you could do if you had the need for this. All right, so that's native views. There you go. A little bit of trivia. So let's talk about using Xamarin Forms in a native project. So this is a bit more interesting. We call this forms embedding. We call it native forms. And this is extremely useful for you when you're like, hey, I love the idea of sharing code, sharing UI code with Xamarin Forms, but you know, I don't want to build my whole app in the Forms way. I don't want to start off with a Forms thing. I just want to share pieces of it. Or maybe you have native projects and you're like, I need to add a new screen to it. I know in the future I'm going to be going to iOS and Android and extending. What can I do to start sharing code today as I make my migration? So Forms embedding allows you to do that. So it's real simple. So you create your content pages as you do today, wherever you're doing them. You can do it in XAML, you can do it in C#. And then you create your, so in this case, this sample, oh wow, no, I don't need to define new. It's okay. New notes page in this example is a content page. And you say dot create view controller. And now that returns to iOS a UI view controller because everything in Xamarin Forms is native anyway, right? So there always is that native view sitting there on the screen. Now you get it, and you can add it to your app. So in this particular case, it's adding it to a navigation controller or something else. So you can do this in several different ways. Let's see. It works with MVVM and data binding. It works with dependency services. When you do native forms inside of your UWP app, for example, you do not share the same navigation service, though. So navigation is very specific to forms and runs off the navigation page. So once you're in iOS or Android land, you're going to do navigation the native way, or you're going to use whatever library you happen to use. So I know MVVM Cross is a popular one that is used for desktop and some other scenarios that are non-forms related. And in that case, you would continue doing your navigation that way. And you would just treat these things as native controls. Once you get the create view controller back, you're good to go. So the only dependency for this is at the time that you use it. I mean, I know that this example is doing this in the finished launching, but this could be anywhere in your application. This could be like the settings page that you only get to if somebody actually ever called it, right? The only prerequisite is that somewhere in the application prior to this working, you need to call Xamarin Forms init. And the good news is that Xamarin Forms init, in the context of forms embedding, doesn't necessarily run all the initialization code. It just runs what is needed to take care of native forms. So it knows that context in which it lives. Does that make sense? Has anybody used forms embedding? Yeah, you have a question, or you used it?
Yes, I've used it, and I have a question.
Okay, not yet. You've used it? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So this is really cool. I've used this before, but for a project I was working on years ago, we tried using it in 100% native iOS and native Android apps, and we looked at the Embedded 4000 project, and I was wondering if that project is going on any type of roadmap to get out of preview.
Right. So the Embeddinator 4000, for those who are unaware, is what we call .NET embedding. And that allows you to take your .NET code and compile it into a framework for iOS or a static library, I believe, for Android. And so that means that you could then be developing either UI or services and middle layer stuff, and you can hand that over to your Objective-C, Swift, Kotlin, Java coworkers, or maybe you have an SDK you want to deliver to vendors that use other platforms. Embeddinator is the tooling that allows you to do that .NET embedding. So to more specifically answer your question, no, there's not a roadmap to get it out of preview. It's not something that we're actively working on. But I can tell you that we have some pretty invested customers that are contributing to it. and pushing it forward. So that's the current status of it. I mean, really what it all comes down to is, you have to make some hard decisions sometimes as to what you're going to work on. That one has a lot of really interesting implications and can do some pretty amazing things, but it's just not a core thing that we're working on right now. Still exists. It's not being killed. It's not been put out to pasture. Maybe someday we'll get back around to investing more in it, but currently it's kind of it's being maintained in that preview status. No engineering resources are dedicated to it, but I'm currently in talks with at least 2 different groups that want to use it, 3 that are using it and or want to use it, and we're helping them be successful with it, but it's not full product lifecycle support, official, blah blah blah. That makes sense? Yeah.
If they're pushing PRs, are you guys at least kind of letting those fall through so it's coming managed?
All through, meaning are we actually paying attention to them and merging them? Yeah. So in particular the one that's doing the contributing now, it's on a different fork, and so it's not been merged into the repository that exists for us. So it needs to be brought all the way over. So if you went to it today, I don't think you would see their PRs. Is what I'm getting at. Other questions about that? So there is a demo that is Kickstarter plus Xamarin Forms native forms embedding and the Embeddinator .NET embedding. And it shows how we can build a UI in Xamarin Forms, use .NET embedding, and bring that into an Objective-C app, the Kickstarter app that's up on GitHub. And you can see it all running and how it works. So that all exists. I think it might be on James Montemagno's repository. It's something that he and I worked on together for Ignite or Connect. No, Connect 2 years ago. So very cool things, a lot of possibilities and ways that you can use this to extend your code sharing and your reach. So maybe you have, and this is really honestly where native forms, I mean, I'm honest about everything, but where native forms becomes really interesting is that this is part of the reason why we continue to maintain, or at least have in existence, all those other backends, those other platforms, right? Because even though the WPF platform backend may not be as feature rich as what you would want to build every application for, it's there enough to where you can take Xamarin Forms code and use native forms to take that Xamarin Forms code into your existing WPF applications. Does that make sense? So you may not start a whole new WPF app with Xamarin Forms today, but you probably have WPF, or at least many customers do have huge WPF apps, and they want to modernize them in some way. Native Forms helps you do that. That makes sense. So it's good validation for why we have those platforms. All right, 11 minutes left. So I wanted to point you at this. Sometimes it's helpful to kind of understand what's going on underneath the hood. And so this is the Xamarin Forms control class hierarchy. So I don't know how well this will show up. I feel like it needs to be blown up big time. Actually, why don't we save it and then open it in preview. Oh, hey, browsers have beach balls too. All right. That is not. Here we go. Oh, where? Does anybody know what that is? Oh, where is my hairbrush? Oh, where? Nobody? Is my hairbrush? Nobody? Do we not have children? It's VeggieTales. Go watch VeggieTales. Oh, where is my hairbrush? Come on, folks.
My kids watch it.
Barbara Manatee, Manatee. You are the one. No?
Don't do that, man.
He's holding his head. He's like groaning over here. Or he's asleep. Probably he might be asleep. All right. So if you ever wanted to see where stuff comes from, where children are born. So you have access to all this stuff. So it's a nice map generated probably out of some Visio thing. And you can see where everything comes from, what it extends from. where it lives in the class hierarchy. So that probably wasn't worth dumping it and looking at it, but there it is. More cool is a page that I don't think a lot of people know exists, but it's this page renderer. What are the native controls used for the forms types? So you can come to this page in documentation. You can say, okay, well, master detail page seems like a really fancy thing. What is actually being used on the native platforms? And then you can come in and you can see, well, on iOS, it's a UI view controller straight up on the phone, but it uses the UI split view controller when it's on tablet. And then it's a drawer layout on Android. And everybody should be using AppCompat at this point, right? I mean, there's no reason to not be using AppCompat. Our templates have been using AppCompat for like years. So, and then on UWP, it's a framework element. It seems like most everything on UWP is a framework element. I guess that's good. Yeah, so this is really, really helpful and useful. So if you're like, oh, how can I customize this particular control? It just doesn't look quite right on iOS. How do I get it to be there? There are certainly several things you can do in the forms layer, but there are times when you're going to want to go to the native layer, and by knowing what the actual control is here, you can go make that difference, make that change yourself. So lots of really good information there. Two more things I'll mention. Did Visual Studio come back? It did come back. But I don't want to run this, right, because it'll blow up. But you know what? So this one's not working, but Zappy was working. I definitely ran it and debugged it. Let's try Zappy real quick. Don't save. So there are on platform, on idiom, on device. Are you familiar with these helpers? So very useful. And there's some new markup syntax that makes it even easier. So the XAML can get super verbose and gnarly. Is gnarly a word here? Yeah. It's in the Canadian English Dictionary.
Yeah.
Gnarly. It's probably not even in my dictionary. But yeah, so XAML can get super verbose, but the markup extensions hopefully help it be easier. So I wanted to highlight a couple of those things real quick. Has everybody? Okay, so I won't make you raise your hand. So Zappy is my demo app that I've been using when I've been Twitch streaming. Here it is. See, it ran, it didn't crash. I know, it's amazing. So I've got this style sheet. See, it's all completely transparent back there, which technically isn't what I want from a design standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Not what I want, but here's what I do like and what I want. So I'll skip over to, not that, I will skip over to the scenarios. Oh, so did you see my gradient? Gradients are in, folks. Embrace it. It's happening. I personally think it's pretty horrendous, but when done well, it's fine. But so this is good stuff. So that's actually that shell renderer. So Andrew was showing you the shell renderer stuff earlier. So that's exactly where I accessed this to be able to change that and make it a gradient. So easy. But anyway, I wanted to go into this. Mostly I'm just looking for the design approval because this is a really cool page. So of course I had that nice intro animation there. And then as I scroll, there's a little parallax. See that parallax? And then as I hit a certain point, there comes my navigation bar. Nice, right? Come on. That deserves an applause. You don't have to. But, this is a real app. This is Reverb. That is a real guitar. It's a Cole Clark. I want one. So I can't really take credit for the Reverb design. I totally ripped it off. But, oh, what is up with you? So anyway, a lot of cool things happening here. Let's look at the code real quick and see if there's anything we could highlight or talk about. And then I'll shut up because I think I got 5 minutes left, right? Yep. 5 minutes? So this is the code for this page.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is Zappy open source? And if it is, where can I find it?
Zappy is that's a leading question, isn't it? You know this, don't you? It is open source. It is on my GitHub. Yeah. Why are you being like that? So it's up on my GitHub, Zappy. I do some things in branches until I'm able to merge it. So I think I've got an iOS 13 dark mode branch. Yeah. I've got a dark 13 branch. So if you're preparing for dark mode and you want to anticipate how you can do that, I'll just feature that here real quick. So you can come in here, and it's the. Did you know that you can do that in GitHub? Yeah. So in GitHub, you just let's go back. This is important. This is really, really important. So I'm on GitHub, and I press the letter T. And now I can search for anything, including my page renderer, and then I can go into my page renderer. So convenient. Not even going to. So aren't you glad you came today? So this is my page renderer, and all I'm doing here is I'm accessing the trait collection, did change, which is an iOS thing, and this is where they tell you, are you using dark mode or not? And so inside of my own method, where I set the app theme, is I come in and I say, okay, are we going dark? Are we really? And so when that happens, then I use my XAML styles and set my resources to dark. And then when it's not, I go away.
So does it only track when it's changed?
When it runs initially, because this is a render, it's going to run the first time. So I do initially set my app theme here, so that, right, if it's starting cold, it'll look at the default and say, should I be light or dark? So I am doing some tracking both in terms of what the operating system's telling me, and also I track it in my app class. I track it there. Cool. So yeah, so Zappy is open source. You can go find it on my GitHub, and you can also check out cool branches like that one. I think that's really the only other cool branch to mention. I don't know what some of those other are. Yeah. So actually, whatever. Oh, because page render doesn't exist on that branch. So the little Jedi guys telling me true. All right. Other questions? I'm basically done, so I'm just like riffing. Other questions, thoughts, concerns? Did anybody learn anything today? All right. Share with me one thing that you learned today.
That T.
T thing. Amazing. Right? Anything forms related?
That navigation thing that you just did now on your example, was that a whole load of hacking to get that to work, or where you kind of where the navigation came into view, or was that relatively easy to do?
It is relatively easy once you get into things. So it's easier now because I did a live stream this week with Javier Suarez, and he added some new features to XAML animation library that create the behaviors necessary to get your scrolling position and percentage. Because really, it's just a matter of as the scroll view moves, I need that information so that I can translate the Y position of everything else.
Yep.
It's really all there is to it. So once you boil it down, it is fairly simple. I had to write more code because I didn't have the behaviors that he had written. But yeah, it's fairly straightforward. So I have a bunch of that, and it's all in here, and it's all up on that GitHub. Some of it's commented out. So here's the key bit for the carousel view, which is the image at the top. It's going to bind to scroll percentage on my SV, which is my scroll view. So it's binding directly to the scroll view. And then I do have a converter here, and all the converter is doing is taking that percentage and changing it to a Y translation. And I have this little hack here on my converters where I use semicolon delimiters so that I can actually pass more than one parameter into my converters. Maybe it's gross to purists out there, but it gets the job done. Again, I was a Flash developer, so this really works. I've never had a customer come to me and be like, I really like the product you delivered. It's beautiful. It meets all of my needs, but you didn't use the MVVM pattern appropriately, and so I'm not going to pay you. Never happens. Never happens. Yeah.
When you're starting a new project, let's say you start a new project today, how do you decide to go with either native or form? How do you? Right.
So I always go forms because I can always rip it out if I actually need it to. Something about my background and my history is that I did a lot of Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android before ever using forms. So I'm extremely comfortable doing Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android and then sharing as much code as I want. So I don't use forms because I don't know Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android. I just find it to be, I mean, it does everything I need to do. It's a high likelihood for me that I'm always going to ship to iOS and Android. And if there is anything that I can't do in forms, I always have the renderer architecture. I can still always get to that stuff. And now that I've got hot reload, I mean, my productivity is much better. And there's a lot more love. You know, somebody was asking earlier about are we investing in certain things or what's going on with the .NET embedding or whatever. I mean, the reality is that what's coming from Xamarin is going to be a whole lot more of what you're getting right now in XAML hot reload. So we're going to continue to improve that. Oh, you want me to stop?
Well, I do want you to stop, but I'm also thumbs upping hot reload.
Yeah. So it's going to continue to get better and better and better. And we have some other announcements that are coming up too. I'll just tease that will blow you away. I think they'll blow you away. They'll make you a lot more productive.
I think Xamarin Forms, I would, like most of the senior developers who've done Xamarin for many years, they would definitely suggest using Xamarin Forms, especially like as David showed. You know, they're simplifying a lot of things that take a lot of time to do. Like, for example, the notch, safe area, all those things, they take a very long time to do. And then there's just a lot more productivity, especially if you are getting someone to develop, you know, like a junior. You don't have to teach them the iOS, the NRS, you just need to know XAML and C#, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Does that help? Yeah, go ahead.
What's your way to do the snap catching? What's your safe bet to go with the catching of large objects, like list of some big class? So I want to save it so that even if the memory goes up, the app shouldn't, the Android OS shouldn't erase it, but I still want to keep the
state management. That's what you're talking about, persistent state management.
Persistent, yeah. I mean, not just for that session, but even if I close and open the app later point, I still want to keep that content safe. Probably, should we save it as a file internally, or what is the best way?
I mean, you can save it as a file. I've done as simple as using the the XML serializer, and I take my app model and I just serialize that thing to disk to my local storage, and then when my app relaunches, I read it back out and replace my app model. I mean, it's kind of not seemingly very pure, but it's extremely effective. Even when I have hundreds of rows of data that are stored in that app model. Now, I don't know that I would recommend that for an enterprise scenario, but I've gotten a lot of mileage out of it, and my app is pretty fast. Now, there are other solutions out there for persisting data. Couchbase, you could roll your own SQLite. Other ways to do it. I think the key is to be able to access those events, those native events, when it's going to background your app or when your app is going to the background because the user's closing it, and making sure that you find the right hooks to persist your information and then read it back out. It's pretty straightforward. Cool. Well, I'm going to wrap it up then. I am going to be around. I don't go back to the United States of America, if they'll even let me back in. Until tomorrow, so I'll be around. Thank you very much.